I'd like to make a further point regarding Lars Anderson's claim that his particular method of shooting was used by Stone Age hunters. He makes this claim based not so much on any kind of physical or artistic evidence, but based on his assumption that it is immensely practical. However, I'd like to disagree with him on that very point. I think it's not practical for many reasons, and that it's also completely unnecessary. To briefly summarize, his method involves carrying the arrows in the draw hand by the nocks, with the points radiating outwards when the bow is drawn back. However, if you visit present-day hunter-gatherer tribes, people who actually use archery to survive and have a real incentive to be practical with it, you will notice that many, though certainly not all, use arrows that are rather long and often very large. You see large arrows like this in a variety of places today, most notably in Papua New Guinea and the Amazon. Some are almost the size of spears, and they do have some distinct advantages over smaller arrows. Long, heavier arrows absorb energy from the bow much more efficiently than light arrows. Anyone who has shot heavy and light arrows out of the same bow can attest that the heavy arrows generate far less hand shock and noise. That's energy that, instead of going into vibration and sound, goes where it's supposed to, into the arrow penetrating the target. Another factor increasing penetration is the fact that the mass of these long arrows is strongly focused forward of their center. This is often termed high FOC. High FOC is a characteristic that is strongly associated with increased penetration. One can consult the Ashby reports for extensive testing on wild African game to prove this phenomenon. The long length of arrows like this also greatly helps with getting them to spine properly when using light stone or wood points, and also with bows that are wide at the handle. Now, I'm not arguing that all ancient hunter-gatherers used arrows as ridiculously large as this. There are certainly many counterexamples of groups using smaller arrows with great effect, but by the practicality equals plausibility logic that Lars himself uses, it's very probable that at least some ancient hunters would have designed arrows using the same principles of longer length, high mass, and high FOC. Indeed, Otzi the Iceman's viburnum arrows were up to 34.75 inches long, and one had a foreshaft of dense dogwood. These arrows are quite long relative to his theoretical draw length of 26 inches. The dense wood of the foreshaft would also have greatly contributed to increasing the FOC of the arrows. Even in areas where shorter arrows were used, appear to have sometimes compensated by using heavier arrowheads, as evidenced by these 4-inch long slate points found in Norway. Now, imagine yourself trying to actually use the Lars technique with longer, higher mass, high FOC arrows. Seems a bit ungainly, doesn't it? The more you apply these solid and proven design principles, the more awkward and unbalanced this speed shooting method becomes. So, if Lars' technique were indeed viable, it would nonetheless be strictly limited to using smaller and lighter weight arrows like the ones he himself uses. And to be fair, there are hunter-gatherer groups that do use more reasonably sized arrows, and some of them use rather small arrows very well, for example, in conjunction with poison. And some of them do hold arrows in the draw hand. But not only do they not hold arrows the way Lars does, but they don't hold vast quantities of arrows for speed shooting. They often have only one extra arrow. Or they might simply have on hand various arrows of different types, each for a different kind of prey. I think there are some very good reasons for this. For one, it's still really awkward. The arrows could easily get snagged or damaged. But more importantly, arrows are not cheap and disposable projectiles that you can afford to waste on a flurry of hastily aimed shots. Large or small, poisoned or not poisoned, arrows are very expensive, time-intensive tools to make. They have to be carefully straightened from carefully selected wood, cane, shoots, or bamboo. Fletching, napping points, making pitch, making poison, these are all tedious tasks requiring great skill. Well-made arrows are greatly treasured by anyone coming from a non-industrial society, and each shot with them is not taken lightly. At one point, Lars argues that speed shooting must have been common because many animals were taken down by multiple shots. He doesn't give his source for this information, or how his source differentiates arrow marks on the animal's bones from the marks made by the butchering process. Moreover, this hypothesis completely ignores the possibility that multiple arrow wounds could very well have come from multiple hunters lying in ambush, for example, as described by Ishi. It was customary in his tribe to station archers behind certain rocks or bushes near well-known deer trails. Then a band of Indians beat the brush at a mile or so distant, driving towards those in hiding. However, this raises some important questions. How many arrows are really needed to kill an animal? If hunters the world over have sought to make each and every arrow they own as lethal and as accurate as humanly possible, whether through poison, high mass, or any other method, then is speed shooting really even necessary? Now, before I show the next slide, a disclaimer. I'm not claiming to be an expert hunter, or even an accomplished hunter, but I'm not a novice. This is just my own personal experience that I can speak from. Now, I shot each of these pigs with one arrow apiece. In both cases, the shots were calculated, deliberate, and well placed. The animals died swiftly with minimal tracking. But upon being shot, they still reacted inhumanly quickly and sprinted a considerable distance. I strongly doubt that any accurate or effective follow-up shot would have been possible on them. But a follow-up shot wasn't necessary. Even if you can shoot an arrow every half second or so, more often than not, the most important arrow is the first arrow. To recap, I think that Lars' method of shooting would not have been practical for many ancient hunter-gatherer groups, given that higher lethality arrow designs make his method clumsy and awkward, not to mention unnecessary for effective hunting. And for situations genuinely requiring multiple shots, such as running prey, multiple prey, or very large prey, it would have been a situation more effectively dealt with by hunting with a team, and not as an individual.